Hi, welcome back to the TT Wine Explorer podcast. I'm Tania Tomaszewska. So this is my 24th podcast episode of this series. For longtime listeners, you'll know that this podcast is not just about wine. In fact, I'm not sure whether I've ever even mentioned a wine tasting note during these conversations. It's about small business, policy, art, travel, food, and what makes entrepreneurs tick. It's about the passion, the grit, curiosity driving the creation of a product or a service, which is offered to us by small players through which we can connect with the world of wine, the senses, and each other. So today's episode is about wine and some of those other things too. My guest is Laura Milnes, founder of the Crushable Wine Club. Crushable is based in Toronto, where Laura hosts small, intimate, in-person wine tastings and runs a pan-Canadian online wine club. Crushable's mission, among many other things, is to highlight and introduce to us under the radar and non-mainstream wines made by very small producers from across our country. Now, this episode is different from my other episodes to date for a few reasons. One, this is the first time that I've not actually met in person my guest on the episode. Laura and I have not met in person, or at least I don't think we have, but I followed her on her blogs and in the Instagram world, and we've met that way. And second, I think this is the first time I've hosted what I'll call a third-party influencer on my show. Now, I don't love the term influencer, and as you'll hear, I don't think Laura does either. But I'll use it at this moment because some of what we talk about today is how Laura, through Crushable, is looking to change the channel on some of the wine industry conversations swirling around us, and how she brings a totally different and unorthodox voice to the party. Laura is a disruptor who wants you to think about your wine buying patterns, to think about buying local, buying small, and getting out of the mainstream. As Laura explains, she does this mainly through the content which she places on her Crushable Instagram platform, in her newsletters, and through the wines which she selects for her Crushable Wine Club. Her wine club followers can buy directly on lines from wineries which she introduces and highlights. Now, if you follow Crushable or Laura, you'll know that she doesn't mince words. She's opinionated and very vocal about her views on the wine industry and what consumers should be thinking about when buying or trying wine. Laura openly refers to her rants, and she does say that, if you're a little precious, she won't be for you. Laura self-describes as an anarcho-libertarian. She's a proponent of just getting out there and doing it, whatever that it is for you. I enjoyed this conversation with Laura. It opened my mind to some blind spots which I have in my own wine journey. We talk about how Laura got her start, what Crushable is all about, the shift to supporting not only local, but also the importance of taking a pan-Canadian approach and getting over our inferiority complex. It's not just about BC and Ontario here in our country. Nova Scotia, Quebec, and Newfoundland are in the mix too. We talk about dropping the kimono and peeling back a few different layers in this very wide world of wine. So buckle up, let's fly. Hi, Laura. Welcome to the TT Wine Explorer podcast. Thanks for joining me today.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
So before we dive into the Crushable Wine Club and what you're doing in Toronto online and virtually, let's start with a little bit of background and a bit of a bio about you. So as I mentioned, you're living in Toronto now, but can you share a little bit about, how and where your wine adventure started and what has brought you to where you are at this moment?
Yeah. So I always joke that I landed in wine by way of osmosis. So when I was 14, my parents, we moved across the country. So I was actually originally living in Scarborough, which is a suburb of Toronto. And that's how you can tell that you're not from Toronto. You say Toronto.
Yes.
I was called out on that recently as well. So yeah, we moved to the Okanagan when I was 14. And most people head there for the beaches and the summers, but my family being the contrarians that we are, we would go for the skiing. And at the time, my dad was practicing as a pediatric dentist, specializing in IV sedation. And he realized, and this is obviously where the entrepreneurial bone came from, he realized at the time there were no offices or specialists in his field between Calgary and Vancouver in this area. So he opted to open the first pediatric dental office specializing in IV sedation in the area in 1997. So we moved there, and they purchased a quarter-acre plot with a house already built on it, adjacent to vineyards that are owned by Mission Hill.
Oh,
And
wow.
at the time, they were farmed biodynamically. So sometimes we'd wake up and there'd be cattle wandering onto our backyard. And it was quite a unique and interesting experience for me, having just moved, like, being a city girl living in what I sort of deemed as a rural kind of area. And just from there, my parents always exposed me to a ton of wine and food and travel. We traveled a ton. My dad is an uber curious individual, always exposing me to just anything from literature to music to everything. And so I think I just got the bone, or I don't know, the urge or whatever it is, the disease,
The
whatever you
bug.
might want to
You got
call
the
it.
bug, the wine bug.
Yeah. And I got it really early and, did the obligatory post-secondary education, but I never really found my way. A series of failed jobs, but I always found my way back to wine, whether it was through education or hosting parties on weekends for friends, traveling to wine regions. And then I just decided to quit an oil and gas job when I was living and working in Calgary and just started hosting wine tastings. And I would advertise on Kijiji. And I started doing stagettes and, a variety of different styles. And then it just sort of grew from there. I moved back to the Okanagan in 2016, worked a couple different harvests, tasting rooms, the whole gamut. And then I started writing a wine column for Now Media. And then that sort of proliferated everything else. Got my name out, I guess, in the wine sphere, writing blog posts and that. And then when I moved to Toronto in 2019, that's when I launched Crushable, and that's when things kind of really, I guess, started to get serious, or maybe people
Yeah,
started
so
taking me seriously.
organic. Yeah, like wine. I find lots of people's wine adventure is just that you're not sure exactly where it's going, but you're going with it because you get really engaged and passionate in the curiosity, and you can never know it all. So I think that's a fantastic summary of kind of what brought you to this moment. Just kind of, I suppose, feeling your way, knowing what was working, right, and what wasn't working for you.
Definitely.
So thank you for that. And we get to 2019, and you're in Toronto, and you're launching Crushable Wine Club. So what prompted you to create that specific business? Was it you saw the tastings and your take up and the blogging working, and you wanted to go with it? What's the mission? What's the MO of Crushable?
So I was getting to a point where, I'm making all of these recommendations, and then winemakers were actually reaching out to me to assist with some side hustle projects they had. Like, oh, I've got a barrel of this. Like, oh, do you want to see if you're I don't even know if it was a customer base at that time, but I guess that's when I dipped my toes into the influencing world. And I was telling my husband last night that I take issue when I get referred to as an influencer because I don't regard myself as such, but maybe it's the connotation of the word. So again, it was just this very organic process. And it was actually an industry contact that sat me down when I was in Vancouver for the Bloom Spring Festival. And he was like, why don't you monetize this? Like, start a wine club. And I'd never even considered that as a path. And so I brought in a couple partners just to assist with like back end tech stuff and, website development and all of that type of stuff, and launched it when I moved to Toronto. And I think it was really cemented once I arrived in Ontario and I realized how backwards it was here. I'd never encountered such hatred towards, local products. I was like, wow, this is unlike anything I've ever experienced. Whereas that doesn't exist in BC. People are so proud of what they can access locally. So
So you
I
mean
realized,
people in Ontario who are not embracing their own Ontario-made wine products? Is
oh
that
yeah,
in terms? Yeah.
the hatred of Ontario made products is rampant, and you'll
Wow.
encounter it often. So I decided that there was a need for this. So I launched the club, and then concurrently, that's when I started hosting the tastings as well, because I was going, I had brought some of my personal collection with me, and I was going around meeting other sommeliers and wine bar owners and what have you, and they had no idea as to the bounty of beautiful BC wines that were being produced. It was just this blind spot that I could never have prepared myself for. So again, it was just it all kind of happened accidentally, and I just either I found an a need that needed to be filled, or I created one. I guess it was a little bit of both, but so yeah, that's kind of how it all happened. And then COVID hit, of course, and it was a very lucrative time for me. So
Yeah. So let's just there are a couple layers there that I think are quite interesting from, starting a business in terms of identifying a gap or filling a gap or seeing a need and wanting to lead in the creation of filling some information in that gap. And then the COVID pandemic. So let's start on your offering and the value proposition to your clients and consumers. So, let's just break it down, the spokes of your business. So you have in-person tastings and you have an online wine club. So why don't we start with your in-person tasting? So could you just chat through, what the options are and what that looks like? And who comes, who is this for? So if I'm in Toronto visiting or I live there, how will I find you and what can I expect? What are my options?
So I started doing those again just accidentally, and I originally started hosting them out of my apartment, and that has since grown. I host them in a variety of different settings. I can go to your office or your home, or I have other venues that I also utilize now as well as like my home studio now too. And it's really meant to be maybe I want to throw people off a little bit because I think
Mm-hmm.
everybody has this misconception about what wine culture is. We really rely on generalizations and a lot of archaic sort of rhetoric of what wine is supposed to be. Show up in a suit, don't swear,
Yeah.
keep it together. Like it's not
Mm-hmm.
casual. Like there's this weird stigma that I encounter, and people are legitimately intimidated. And so I think just having worked in tasting rooms and restaurants and being so embedded in the culture for so long, I wanted to show people that it actually is fun and it's meant to be a
Mm-hmm.
social lubricant and convivial and joyful and playful and goofy and a forum where you can say all of the wrong things, and then also utilizing this very underappreciated vessel, which is Canadian wine. So I'm changing
Mm-hmm.
minds in like a multi-layered way, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you have to show, you can't tell people. So first of all,
Yeah.
you have to get them to show up. So it was a very slow, methodical process, amassing reviews, utilizing social media, but also word of mouth too. And it's still an uphill battle,
Yeah.
definitely, but
Yeah.
it's certainly a different experience than it was 6 years ago. I'm coming into my sixth year now, I guess. I'm a lot more confident, and life always throws you curveballs, and it
Yeah.
inevitably ends up being something that you never could have expected. It became this space for connection where,
Mm-hmm.
we're all opening our kimonos and dropping them to the floor and exposing our souls to one another. And it can be this really magical bubble for a period of 2 to 3 hours. And
Mm-hmm.
then, the wine and the food just sort of feels a little bit ancillary, right? You're like, oh, I
Right.
came here for Canadian wine, but oh my God, now I'm telling this random woman my life story, right? So
Yeah. Well,
that's what
wine
became really
wine does
magical
that.
about it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well,
exactly. And
wine
by the end,
connects,
it's
right?
exactly, yeah. And that's kind of what I realized. And I remarked on the fact that the wine industry is really missing out on this because every other
Mm-hmm.
job and experience that I'd had was very transactional, choreographed, stick to the script. Okay, you got to cut the tasting off by 15 minutes, push them
Mm-hmm.
through and get on to the next. And I always hated that. And so I always was devising like, well, how could I do it? And so many people were telling me that I was well, what do you talk to people about? Like, oh, that's not a profitable model. And,
Mm-hmm.
just so
Mm-hmm.
many naysayers along the way. And if I get told that I can't do something, I'm going to find a way in order to do it. So that's how it all came about. And
Right.
then it just happened to be growing concurrently with the wine club. And now they sort of act
Mm-hmm.
as funnels for one another, whether
Right.
they buy wine from me and they come to a
Reflexive.
tasting or exactly, or vice versa. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it sounds like it's a very intimate and tailor-made, for lack of better words, in terms of the moment and from the moment. Because I think, from my experience too, with certain tastings, smaller groups in particular, you go with it, right? And I think there's accumulated experience, not only what we as maybe leaders of a tasting, if I can call it that, or a wine guide. You have accumulated knowledge of how you experience the wine and about the wine to share the stories, but also hearing what people are coming for. So it sounds to me that your in-person tastings are quite intimate and also it sounds like specifically and only exclusively Canadian wine. There's some food involved, and then also, do people come and they might meet other people they don't know? So it's kind of shared, or are they private experiences mainly?
Both. So it's kind of choose your own adventure. So a lot of people feel very uncomfortable if they're aware that they might be the only people, because I don't
Mm-hmm.
have caps or minimums. So if you're two
Right.
people and you want to come on a date night, I'm happy to accommodate that. But it definitely
Yep.
freaks people out a little if they're going to be, if they have the
Yeah.
awareness that they're going to be sitting with, a quote unquote wine expert.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
terrifies people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so my goal is to show them there's nothing to be scared of. I'm not pulling out a PowerPoint deck. There's no
Yeah.
exam. I'm not spewing, one way knowledge at you. It's an interaction. And I learn just as much from consumers as they do from me, because there's people that have phenomenal palates, noses. They pick up on things that maybe I never would have otherwise. And to your point from earlier before you hit record, it's about educating, but also learning from the consumer. Like, what do you want? What are your buying patterns? Like, why would this
Mm-hmm.
be, a potential barrier for you? Like all of these things. So
Mm-hmm.
I learned so much. I've learned how to be a better conversationalist, a better listener, really
Yeah.
attune my perceptions of people. It has been an invaluable education in so many ways.
Yeah, and we'll jump to that maybe in a little bit later. But one point is, I think, increasingly in the industry, wine industry, is the rhetorical question of how do we engage future wine consumers? And I think the listen as well as just talk to or tell is a very important discussion to have. But maybe we'll jump to that a little later. But it sounds certainly that you are embracing that approach. And I think as we move forward generationally, and also just what's happening on the landscape, I think that's something that needs to be discussed more. So that's your in-person wine tastings. They sound a lot of fun. I don't know when I'll be out your way next, but I'd love to get in person and come along to one of them and learn and taste. Okay, so you have a virtual online club, and thank you for mentioning the genesis of that 2019, because the rise of the wine club, if I can call it that, online wine club, certainly a silver lining, I think, for a lot of people from the pandemic. I mean, certainly there were a lot of challenges and devastating outcomes for people, particularly in hospitality and wine and tourism. But I think the rise of the wine club, and if I can use this term, democratization of wine, so to speak, where people are at home and they can learn more online about experiencing wine. So people, small business operators like you could really, I guess, gain from that in many ways. So could you talk a little bit about your, what's Crushable online club right now? So for example, where are the wines from? How many wines are in a pack? How often do you do release? Is it subscription? How does someone find out about your club and what you offer?
Yeah. So again, it was, I guess I wanted to come up with a different proposition than what was prevalent at the time. So in my experience, having worked at so many different wineries, it was a commitment. So you had to commit to a certain number of shipments per year. And I mean, upfront for, most wineries, that's 3, maybe 4, even more. And you're talking several $1,000s. That's probably not doable for most people. So mine is
Mm-hmm.
entirely voluntary. And it's also as engaging as it is also a sales channel. So I make a really concerted effort to not just have every email being, oh, here's an offer, here's a sales offer.
Yeah.
It's also my thoughts and my rants, and I want to hear from people. And so it's about 2 to 4 offers per month. And sometimes there are mixed international packs. If I happen to be particularly excited about something, I'll throw that in, like a 24-hour flash sale or something. But generally, it's anything from across Canada, from Quebec, Nova Scotia, BC, all over Ontario. I've just actually recently discovered a winery in Newfoundland. So it's very
Wow.
much charting new frontiers and trying to find the next, not necessarily like the next biggest thing, but something that would get people really excited about, and to show them all the beautiful things that are being produced across the country. Because I think in my journey and research of trying to find out what the hell the Canadian identity is, I think inferiority is a big part of that. And
Yeah.
so I really want to show people to stop apologizing and just start embracing and celebrating.
Yeah.
And so it could be anything from a 2 or 3 pack to a 6 pack. And then I have another tier, what I call my concierge, which is basically my VIPs they get first right of refusal, access. They can mix and match and make their own sort of bespoke or curated packs. Whereas what I call my public list, just the general list, they get a set pack and then it's a set time. So it's 48 hours, take it or leave it. And then the link goes dead and you can't get it
Yeah.
again. And of course, like if you email me, like, sure. But the whole point is to just motivate people to, okay, you got to jump on this, because I'm not promoting big wineries. I'm working with wineries that are making sub 1,000 cases per year. So it's like, there's not a lot to go around. And I want people to be aware of them instead of just, going to their local monopoly liquor store and buying Peller or something like that. You can be drinking better for around relatively the same price and have it shipped right to your door. So that's the whole motivation.
So there is so much there. Wow. In no particular order. And, the timing of focusing on Canadian identity and how we look at that, both from a consumer point of view, a producer point of view, and I think right now on the political landscape, in broad terms, in light of the tariff landscape and what's going on globally and how wine industry players are being affected. And also within Canada now in terms of how individuals are choosing to embrace more Canadian products. And, certainly where I am based in Vancouver, Buy BC is huge. I think Buy Canada is huge. I know it's early days, but, and you were already on this about Canadian identity and individual province products, but, have you seen an uptick in engagement with you and your club in the last couple of months that you can say, oh, I've seen more of an uptick because of what's happening on that political landscape, or is it a bit early to tell?
I wouldn't say the last couple of months. I would say, well, yeah, I guess with the tariff and trade war conversation. But the real uptake was in the last, I guess, week, where on a whim, I made this video offering replacements to J. Laura and Josh because they have been withdrawn from shelves, or removed from shelves rather. And I didn't even think about the timing or how topical it was. Everything that I kind of do is very in the moment. It's very intuitive. I don't want to say that I'm not a planner, because I am always thinking strategically, but I always want to strike while the iron is hot. And so I was like, okay, well, people can't get these, in my opinion, subpar or inferior products that they're accustomed to drinking. And that's a whole other conversation why they like them. Why not suggest some Canadian alternatives? Now's the time to support Canadian, right? And it completely blew up. I think it's almost at 1 million views now.
Wow.
I tripled my following. I couldn't believe it. And I've been inundated with emails and DMs and comments ever since. So it's unfortunate.
So for those who haven't seen that, what are some swaps for those? Did you give some specific examples or was more regional suggestions?
Yeah, so they were all from Ontario, and I think that's just by virtue of where I am. And I've really learned to embrace all of the wine producing regions here, even though I was kind of a hater before, but it's the devil, I suppose. And so I'm a really big fan of a producer called Fogelar. It's made by a guy named Mark Pistor. He's also a professor at Brock, so he teaches enology. So like incredibly intelligent guy, supremely versed on, viticulture. And he makes this fabulous entry-level Cabernet Franc at $19. And
wow,
it has performed so well in every tasting, or what I like to call conversion therapy for people. And they're always surprised at what a crowd pleaser it is, and that it's Canadian. Another one was Liebling, also Cabernet Franc. And for me, I don't want to be recommending things that potentially cheapen my integrity or my reputation. So I'm not going to be recommending potentially something that's on that same level of Josh or J. Laura, where they're back blending sugar. Like, those options do exist for people, but that is not the category that I want to be affiliated with. So Cabernet Franc is a grape that we do really, really well in Canada, across regions. It sort of transcends, regional differences and everything. So another one was Liebling. It's owned by two sisters. Their family is multi-generational viticulturalists. And that one is really delicious too. That always performs well in my tastings. And then another one, which is more on the natural lower intervention side, is from Maynard, a female winemaker, Yvonne Irvine. So just really small, tiny little micro virtual producers that most mainstream consumers would never have any idea exist. And yeah, I don't even know how many cases that they've sold now since that reel, but it's put them on the map. And it's sort of, I've been joking with a number of my friends who are like, yeah, you're the, 10-year overnight success, right? It's like, I feel like I'm finally getting the attention that I've deserved.
The
I've been beating
traction.
this drum for a decade, and now people are paying attention because they can't get, the McDonald's wine that they normally
Yeah.
purchase. So
Yeah. And it's, from altitude and, reading, I often enjoy reading books by people who've talked about their business growing in all sorts of sectors or podcasts. And you never know when that tipping point is going to be. You can't plan it. And, or when you get sticky, right? When your product is sticky and it is the 10 years or the 10,000 hours.
Yeah.
Again, so much to talk about. So, Cabernet Franc, I love that as a side chat at some point about, could that be one of our, pan-Canadian grapes? Because, and we'll get to this, for our, interprovincial barriers, I've heard that Ontario makes great Cabernet Franc, but I've been trying mostly Cabernet Franc from BC in terms of Canadian Cabernet Franc. I love that grape. I love it. So here we go. So I imagine, also on the political landscape, as a result of the tariff trade war, the long overdue kind of ramping up of the discussion to bring down our interprovincial trade barriers. And, I've done a couple of podcast episodes with Mark Hicken, who you'll be aware of, about, why do we have interprovincial trade barriers when it comes to moving, our own products, wine and other alcoholic products across our own borders. This looks like it might be, I'm cautiously optimistic that this is going to be, those barriers are going to be lowered soon. But, from your perspective, how do you see this, this will open up a lot of things for you, I assume. I mean, I know you're already working on a pan-Canadian basis, but what are your thoughts right now? Is this really going to happen? Are the borders, so to speak, our own internal borders, really going to come down? And what do you expect how this might affect your business?
This is a discussion I've been having with a lot of people, and Mark Hicken is a great resource for me. I'm always going to his website and reading his posts, and he actually used to have a schedule or like a spreadsheet of the current sort of goings on of like who's allowing direct to consumer shipping and who's not, and that used to be such a great resource for me. And
like the traffic light, right? Red, orange, red, yellow, green.
That what a great resource. I was actually really sad when he took it down, but he recently wrote something about this conversation, this topic exactly, and his conclusion is that they've been threatening or talking about this for the better part of a decade, right? So I'm probably not the right person to ask because I basically have no trust in the government whatsoever. I often describe myself as an anarcho-libertarian. I mean, why else would I be doing this business that effectively exists in a gray area? My opinion is that I think that you should sort of do what works for you and allow for culture to kind of catch up. And that I don't think that we need permission. I don't think there's any jurisdiction over these barriers as it is. I think it's just protectionism for the monopolies, because how else are they going to collect tax revenue? That's my opinion on it. And I think people should continue shipping as it is. And I don't know if they'll follow through with it. It's going to be a ton of red tape and bureaucracy and legislation that it's going to take years before they probably pass it. Who knows? I don't really let it deter me either way. So.
Yeah. And also, there's the devil's always in the detail, as they say. And, it also coming down to the monetization and also the accounting of collecting, taxes, levies, markups, however the word we're going to use for money, the tax on alcohol and who gets to collect it. And again, I think that's, and when and how, and I think that's a whole other conversation. And that needs to be sorted through. So, and I think a lot of it is, we've chatted about this before, in terms of awareness raising, I think for consumers, I think that a lot of people aren't aware of these high barriers and why is it that I don't see right now many wines at all from Ontario or other parts of Canada here in BC and vice versa. So we'll see, we'll watch the space. But in the meantime, you carry on, you have your platform. You are doing all sorts to engage for consumer awareness and to support the products that you think that you like and that you think deserve airtime, and I think under what would be under the radar for many people. So thank you for that. Gosh, where to from here? There's so much. Okay, well, so how how do you select the wines that you're going to showcase? Like, what's your process? It sounds to me that it's a mix of you go to wineries maybe in Ontario, or when you travel across Canada, you try some, you're like, wow, okay, this is going to be, or you go to trade tastings, or it sounds like maybe it's intuitive as well and it's part of your journey. And you're like, hey, I want to share this with my club, with my people. Is that how it works in general terms?
I mean, basically, I'm promoting my palate, what I happen to be into at the time. And for a while there, it was natural wine. So I was on this journey of finding every single natural winemaker or winery in Canada. And then I realized that had its limitations and there was a real lack of transparency there. So now more or less, it's just, I look for quality wine, quality to price ratio, depends on the intention or what the context is. Of course, in my consumer tastings, I want to have those bangers, those ones that are going to convince and change minds. And I have those ones that I definitely reach for. And then every now and again, I might throw in a curveball, but I never really quite know how that's going to land. And then maybe just anything that's particularly new or people who are taking risks. And that's sort of has seemed to, again, happen to me by accident where, I've discovered wineries and then like a year or two later, they're hitting it big and like they're having their moment. So I don't know, finding the band before it's cool kind of thing. That's always been very satisfying and vindicating for me. But generally anybody who's just, waving the flag of local, like really proudly supporting, like, this is what we do well. They're not trying to plant something strange or eccentric. They are understanding that these are the varieties that do really well. And of course, there might be exceptions. Like I have a really dear friend in Beamsville, Corey Mio. He's about to plant Albarino, but that was only because he has been researching and focusing on like what really grows well there. And he has a little plot that he discovered would potentially be really appropriate for Albarino, but that's going to be, I don't know, less than an acre or something. But generally it's the people who understand what really thrives here, and they're not trying to play God, and they have a really deep understanding for the terroir and regions that they're working within, and just respecting them and allowing the fruit to speak for itself, as opposed to capitulating, I guess, to the J-Lore or the Apothic or the Josh drinkers. And there's no shortage of them. There's tons of Appostamento style in Niagara to appease that category. I'm not really a big fan of it because I don't think it's a reflection of what just sort of happens naturally. But I understand that there is a demographic for that, just as much as there is for people who love Baco Noir or... So that's kind of the juncture I've arrived at, where it's just quality, it's balance, affordability. And even another good example, I was on another podcast recently, and we started with drinking Henry of Pelham Cuvée Catherine. And that is a wine that I never would have bought before, just because they're more of a volume producer, but they are still family owned. And I think at $24.95, it was absolutely delicious. So I will definitely recommend that to someone in the future. So I'm also discovering new to me things too, that I maybe would have written off in the past.
Yeah. And I think, I think we all, whether we're in the industry or the consumer, if we as consumers are interested in embracing that adventure, I mean, it's there for the taking. And I'm also constantly revisiting things or trying to embrace things or try that I may have discounted, or just, there's only so much wine you can try in a day or a week or a year. But thank you for sharing that, because I think, I mean, I like to say to friends and family when we're trying wine together and they're asking me about quality and price and how much do you have to spend and what's a good wine, and oh, T, we're kind of worried when we come to your place to bring wine because you're a wine person. And I always like to say, hey, don't apologize for the wine that you like, and don't apologize for the wine that you don't like. It's like art. And I think that there's a separate quality assessment that, we can go through and talk about, well, you mentioned a balanced wine. For a lot of people, what does that mean? And so you can do a quality assessment, but that doesn't mean that I have to like it. I can say, well, I can appreciate that that's a well-made wine, but it's not my jam, right?
Yeah.
So thanks for sharing that, because it sounds to me that the people should sign up if they're open for the adventure and to trying new things. So just on that, and I'll put it in the show notes, but so I don't forget to ask you during this conversation, how do people find you? Like, how do they sign up? Where should they connect with you? Where tell people now, how do they join your club? How do they find you?
I'm most active on Instagram, so at Crushable Wine Club. That's where that's kind of where you can really delve into what I'm all about. I have a wealth and huge inventory of library content, talking all about Canadian wine going years back, but then that acts as the funnel into, my website where you can join the wine list, you can book a tasting. I utilize online travel agencies, so like Airbnb Experiences, TripAdvisor, Get Your Guide, and they act as just another voice or amplifier to get me in front of different people. And they all have different demographics they appeal to, like Europeans or Americans or whatever. So yeah, that would be the best way. My website, which
Okay,
is
and then
just
people can sign
crushable.club.
up by email to receive your newsletters, right? After through a link there, is that right?
Yeah. So on my website, I have a sign up tab, and then you'll get my weekly emails. And yeah, just to preface or maybe give a little bit of a disclaimer, I am pretty outspoken. I do not mince my words. So if you're
Yeah.
a little precious, it might not be the right form for you. But I think people find it really refreshing, especially some of the
Yeah.
commentary of late on Instagram. We've been talking about Miami Pinot Noir, and people are asking for replacements for that. And
Yeah.
I don't know that I have one
Yeah.
because it has about 21 grams of sugar per liter, and I don't
Hmm.
think you're drinking wine at that point, right? So
Well, or it's a different style, and maybe people don't realize that there is that perception of the ripe round fruit and sweetness, more sweet. And I think that there are people who enjoy that style, but there may be people like, oh, I haven't really thought about the sugar level. Maybe this is a good way for people to say, hey, maybe I'll reconsider that and try something else that has lower sugar. I mean, I'm seeing generally as a conversation, I get asked all the time, all sorts of beverages, alcoholic or non, about, hey, what's the sugar content on that? So there you go. Maybe you're sparking conversation within someone's own mind about, being a little, putting some more analysis about what they're drinking.
I hope so.
Okay, so where to from here? Let's talk about, well, we've kind of jumped around a lot about. Why don't we talk about just maybe a couple, if you don't mind, a couple of your current fave producers in Canada? You've mentioned a couple in Ontario now, which is great. Okay, how about you mentioned Newfoundland? So do you want to mention any, let's say, from British Columbia, Quebec, Nova Scotia, just for people who are listening, something that might be new to them to hear?
hmm So I actually came across a winemaker recently from Quebec, from Domaine de la Bauge, and her name is Véronique Lemieux. And her and I connected on Instagram. That's kind of how I meet everybody these days. And we hit it off. And before I knew it, she was booking a train ticket with her husband to come to Toronto so that she could pour me her flight of her new project called Les Cuvées de Véronique. And we ended up having pretty much our own private masterclass, which is all made from entirely hybrids. And I was just absolutely blown away that, she took the time and the effort to come all this way and stayed for the whole weekend. And it was so intimate and curated and surprising because I think in the hybrid landscape, the people who are most averse are sommeliers because they have been conditioned to think that wine is very hierarchical. Well, you have to respect the noble varieties and like the OGs, like, French wine and Italian wine and Spanish and all of that type of stuff. And so they're not as open-minded as they might think. And so I really applauded her bravery for taking on a really challenging category and working with varieties that aren't all that well studied. And so she's also
Mm-hmm.
contributing research to the university there as well. So it just so impressive, so knowledgeable, but so humble at the same time. So that's something that I'm really excited about. And there is going to be an upcoming collaboration with her. So if you end up joining the list, you'll have the opportunity to taste those wines because they're currently not available on the market of late. I'm a huge fan of Lightning Rock. They're in Summerland. I just and
Great
regardless of
bubbles.
yeah, and whoever the winemaker happens to be, like formerly it was Jordan Kubeck, now it's my friend Sebastian Ott. It's one of those wineries that transcend styles. Whether you're a natural wine person or conventional, it's of sound quality just really, really high level farming. They do it really well. And then it's no secret for anybody who's followed me for a while. I love Whispering Horse. They're in the Fraser Valley, and they are putting that region on the map. There are a number of other wineries locally, but most of them are importing grapes from the Okanagan, whereas Whispering Horse grows all of their own varieties. And again, they're working with a lot of hybrids as well. And again, just so high quality, despite the fact that they haven't really even been doing it for very long, and also owned by just the kindest, nicest people. And in fact, I'm about to launch a collaboration with them this week, and it's been really interesting. The people specifically from Ontario who caught wind of my viral reel, they were like, well, I can't get BC wines here. And it's like, yes, you can. Join my email list. Like, stay tuned. So I'm hoping that I'll get them a little bit more distribution to them. And yeah, there's no shortage. Venturi Schultz on Vancouver Island, like, there's no shortage. There's so many gems that people just don't even realize are hidden in plain sight.
Yeah. And so for sidebar for the visitors, coming to BC, or for my local BC neighbors, Lightning Rock, if you're in the Okanagan Valley this season, it is beautiful. It's a spectacular location in Summerlin, sweeping views. And in the past, I've really enjoyed their bubbles, and I think their Viognier Rosé and Pinot Noir. So I recommend that as a visit for all you out there who are heading to the Okanagan. And yeah, Whispering Horse, I loved. I think it was one of their inaugural sparkling Pinot Gris, which looks like a rosé. It tastes like a Cremant for me, and I loved it. So I need to try. I think they were doing Epicure too. So definitely need to go out there for a visit. So and Venturi Schultz, of course, wine, but also balsamic vinegar, which is beautiful. Yes. I think so. Okay, so thank you. You have so much. There are so many gems that you are pulling up. So that is fantastic. Okay, and hybrids. Thanks for mentioning that. I was actually just reading an article last night in Pour magazine about hybrids. And, there's a lot of discussion in British Columbia around where to from here in terms of replanting following a couple of devastating growing seasons. And I think the hybrid discussion is, for many, kind of more securely back on the table, looking at things. So stay tuned. So thanks for mentioning that as well. And I think it's time for a lot of people to revisit, including me. I need to try more.
Well, it's really hard to stay open, right? I think we all would love to describe ourselves as open-minded, but we all have blind spots. We all have convictions. We all have bias, right? So
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one particular example of a hybrid grape that I've been enjoying recently from BC is the sparkling Cayuga from Zanata. I don't know, in Cowichan Valley.
I haven't tried that.
So it is beautiful. I love it. So Cayuga, it was a grape that was a hybrid created at Cornell University. And it's near, I think Cayuga is one of the lakes in upstate New York. And it was developed for that climate. So anyways, that's something for you to try. I love it.
Yeah. I'll have to Cayuga. Google it.
Yeah, Google it. It's great. Okay. So looking forward, I think we've kind of touched on this, looking into our crystal ball 5 or 10 years ahead, how do you think our Canadian wine industry landscape could look? But how do you think it will look? Or maybe they're not mutually exclusive. Maybe it's the same. Or is it time will tell? What do you think? Or, I know that's a very broad question. What do you think?
I really don't know. I mean, I think people are maybe a bit afraid as to the direction we might take politically, especially with the upcoming election. I don't know. I think that we really need to bring it back local. And I think that we had that once upon a time, and we've just sort of lost sight of what's important. And now we're really experiencing the cost of our choices, espousing globalism and convenience and Amazon culture. It's like we kind of need to get back and support our farmers and winemakers and artisans and all of that. And that's a conversation I have with a lot of people. They're like, I realized that just ordering something from a local artisan or producer or whatever it might be, it's actually more cost effective. I think we've been bamboozled by this culture of convenience. That's aside from the LCBO, because that's a whole other conversation. But I really think that there has been this massive trade-off, and I don't think it's a good one. I think that we're realizing that now we're paying for those choices. So I think there's going to be maybe a slow, methodical shift back to, you know, small town Canadiana kind of vibe. I really hope so. And a lot of people that I talk to shop at farmers markets and they only want to buy local. So, but I think that's probably a very small snapshot of a niche demographic I happen to find myself in, because just based on who I've been interacting with on Instagram, it's pretty shocking and surprising what people deem normal. But there's got to be a limit to this progression. So I hope that I don't, and maybe not to the effect of like what's transpiring in the US, where it's very clunky and tyrannical and strong arm, and but I don't know. We'll see. Time will tell. And I think I'm very much a person of, you have to take those actions and implement them in your day-to-day life, and then hope that maybe you influence or impact other people's buying decisions. That's very much what I'm a proponent of. I don't think that I'm gonna, get on my soapbox and change the minds of thousands of people. I think it's one by one, and that's kind of why I have the format of my tasting experience too. It's the butterfly effect, right? So
yeah, no, for sure. And speaking about paying for product and where your choices, I think for me, I imagine it would be the same for you. I don't have a complete knowledge or visibility right now to, what prices are if you go into a shop in Ontario, whether it, whatever you're looking for. But certainly in British Columbia, I have, it's often that I have discussions with people about the price of wine here, BC made. I'll just stick to BC made in comparative terms to wines from other parts of the world, whether it's Europe or South America or, beyond. And I spent quite a bit of time sharing my observations and experiences about what goes into making a wine in British Columbia, in terms of input costs and land costs and labor and time and small volumes, and the comparison with, larger producers from overseas who are, may have been doing this for generations and have economies of scale, or have, they're a lot longer playing in the market. And for me, in terms of that one at a time, I think a lot of it is, this is about wine, but it's about a small business, and most often a small family business or collection of individuals who are passionate and will do anything to make that wine. And everything goes into this, and it costs a lot, and a lot of people sacrifice a lot for this. And so I find, as part of the awareness raising about value and price, I think, that's something that we still need to have. And more and more though, I think in this, buying local and buying an artisanal product, this is part of the conversation too. I say, well, people, if you go out and you buy a vanilla poured aromatherapy candle, you spend $30 on it, and it's locally made, and it's got all natural essential oils, that's handmade here, like this bottle of wine, $30,
Yep.
let's say, or 25. Again, from a small family that has poured themselves into that. So I don't know if you're, in Ontario, I imagine you're having this similar kind of conversations dealing with Canadian products. And I think this is part of a broader conversation about, this is also about business. It doesn't mean you have to like that product. There's lots out there again, but it's, what goes behind the scenes to make what's in that bottle. And also just that bottle. How do you get that bottle? Glass prices, it's very challenging.
It is. And it's so deeply psychological too, like the buying patterns of people. That's something that I've worked really hard to try and understand. And it loops into like food waste and the cost of food. And it's like, well, but it's about your buying decisions. How much of your food are you actually cooking? How much are you wasting? And I've been getting the commentary that, oh, well, your recommendations, they're so expensive. $30? That's not expensive, because if you're buying quality wine, you're not going to be guzzling it. You're going to be enjoying
and less
it.
is
It's
more.
like, it's shifting your behaviors, right? And maybe that sounds like a very pompous sort of sensibility, but it's really not, because you're supporting a small farmer at the end of the day. And And my husband and I talk about this a lot too, how we've intellectualized things that are innate. You go to Europe, they're not talking about their sourdough starter or
No,
just
they're just
how,
living it.
exactly. They're just living it because that's what works. That's what tastes
That's part of
better.
life.
That's what's more sustainable. It's not, I find it very cringe in our culture right now, but I guess that's by virtue of our age. Like, we're a relatively young society. So hopefully in 100 or 200 years, we'll catch up. But I just don't think that we're there yet.
Well, in terms of looking at Crushable going forward, I think, just based on some of the things that we've chatted about, I think there's lots of things about timing and, nothing happens overnight in terms of success. But I think the timing too for buying, supporting local, but also got back to my point about engaging future wine consumers and, whatever, let's call it the Zillennials, the Gen Z and then the millennials, more and more data coming out on how they engage with products more broadly, and also in the alcohol industry is experiential, getting off the phones and into experiences, connecting with each other. Less is more, and adventure and learning and trying new things. And so I think, a couple of your comments, that's of appeal now, and I think going forward. So with that, I'd like to wish you well for Crushable's next set of the journey. And I'd like to thank you not only for your time today and sharing your thoughts and observations, but for all that you do in raising awareness and being vocal and sharing the love, the passion that you have for products that you find in Canada, and to keep going in this, the landscape we're in and what I know can be very, very challenging. We face lots of barriers with just simply having a small business and having a small business in this space. I know. So thank you. And I really hope that I can come your way soon, or we can meet up somewhere in some vineyards on one of your trips back to BC and we can clink glasses in person and carry on the conversation.
Absolutely. That would be great.
Thanks for listening to this discussion with Laura Milnes of the Crushable Wine Club today. If this has intrigued you and you are keen to learn more or try it out, jump onto Laura's Instagram handle, check out her feed, sign up for her newsletters to receive her rants, industry commentary, and wine club offerings. Details are in the show notes. We all choose our own journey and what we support, but I hope that you are finding the conversations which I'm having on my TT Wine Explorer podcast to be informative and helpful as you chart your own course. Please do share my series with others if you like it. The more listeners we have, the more we can share knowledge. Knowledge is power, and power can be in the hands of the consumer, now more than ever. I'm working on my next episode now and look forward to seeing you back here again soon on the TT Wine Explorer podcast. Until then, take care.